Yeah. Okay. This is a little creepy. All right. I'm gonna put it here. You know what? You think it's okay back here? Not really. No.
All right. We're good.
You're gonna take it down a notch? Okay. You think that's what's doing it? Yeah. Okay, well, still pretty loud. All right. I'll just go with it. So, welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. I am Phil Bowden, so I'm standing in for Carol Zace, representing the.
Are we broadcasting this? And we'll have to use the mic?
We are recording.
Okay, all right, well, we'll just, anyway, representing the Civic Association. And this august panel is really a lure just to get enough of our voting members here to be a quorum. So we got to do a quick vote for the board of directors of the Civic Association. We have two returning board members, Carol Zace and Krista Curtis. And then there's a nominee for the third member for that 3-year term to fill it out. That's Carol Stento. So we'll open the floor to see if there are any other nominations. There being none, I'll ask for a motion from a member, Civic Association member, to close the nominations. Okay. All in favor? Aye. And now I'll ask for a motion to approve the nominations. Okay, seconded. And a vote, aye means we'll approve the nominations, and all in favor? Opposed? No, okay, the nominations carry. So that's, we will, I'll ask for now a nomination, a motion to adjourn the meeting. We have a little other business, but I'm going to get the formal part out of the way. Okay. Yeah. Okay, seconded. All in favor? Okay. We will, not as part of the official meeting, but invite any of you who are not 2025 members of the Civic Association to join. You can just go to the website, or there's forms in the back. We'd love to have you. And then we're going to take another 47 seconds for a public announcement from the Fire District Moderator, Lally Lloyd.
Thank you all. We're all here tonight because pollution from our septic systems affects the groundwater the Katuitt depends on to nourish our trees and make voting fun. Citizen participation in local governance is like clean groundwater. It nourishes our community with insight, skill, and experience. As moderator, I am looking for people to serve on 2 fire district committees. And if you know someone who's interested, my contact information is on the pink slips in the back, and I would love to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for keeping it short, Lally. And we won't hold this up any longer. I'm going to turn it over to David to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you to the Civic Association for inviting us here tonight. I'm David Sherbuck on behalf of the Board of Water Commissioners of the Fire District. I'd like to thank the association for this chance to discuss a very important issue, which is wastewater treatment and the quality of our drinking water, 2 things that are closely aligned. We feel it's our duty to help clarify some of the questions the village will one day need to answer as the town embarks on the next phase of its comprehensive wastewater management plan. Among the issues we hope to explore tonight are the impact and threat of wastewater on the quality of Katuitt's drinking water, freshwater ponds, and the harbor. What is driving the need and the deadlines to address wastewater? Will municipal sewer ever be extended by the town to connect Katuitt? Are so-called IA, or Innovative Alternative Septic Systems, effective? What does source water protection mean, and why is the fire district seeking an amendment to the water department's enabling legislation to gain permission to work with private property owners to protect the drinking water supply? And what can we as homeowners do to protect the aquifer and reduce contamination of it and the bays? What will it cost, and when will we need to act? To answer these questions and yours, we have invited a panel of esteemed experts. We have 2 members of the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan ad hoc committee with us tonight. They are to my left, the chairman of that committee, Katuitt Water Commissioner Scott Horsley, founder of Horsley Witten Group, a professor of hydrogeology at Tufts University, and an expert in hydrology, wetland science, and water resources management. Joining Scott on the CWMP committee is Zenas Z. Crocker, executive director of the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. Z was born and raised on the Cape, graduated from Barnstable High and McGill University, and following a career in finance, returned to the Cape 10 years ago when he became increasingly concerned about the condition of our waters, both fresh and salt. He is a champion of using natural systems and technologies to solve Cape Cod's nutrient overload crisis. Under his leadership, the Clean Water Coalition has taken the lead in working with local, state, and federal agencies and other nonprofits in restoring cranberry bogs, testing IA septic systems, and analyzing the economic and ecological benefits of wastewater treatment. From the town of Barnstable's Department of Public Works, we're joined by Assistant Director Rob Steen, the person overseeing the town's wastewater treatment facility and its expansion from Hyannis westward into Hyannisport, Centerville, and beyond. Prior to joining the town, Mr. Steen worked for 12 years as a consultant responsible for the planning, design, and construction of municipal and industrial wastewater treatment and collection systems facilities. He's a registered professional engineer in the state of Maine and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and holds a master's degree in ocean engineering and in civil engineering. He also served for 30 years as an officer in the United States Navy, retiring as a captain from the Civil Engineering Corps in 2019. He was the commanding officer of Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 26. Mark Drainville is a principal at the engineering firm GHD and manager of its Hyannis office. His areas of expertise include water, stormwater, and wastewater collection, treatment planning, design and construction phase services. A board-certified environmental engineer, Mark is a graduate of Worcester Polytechnic Institute and has earned a master's in environmental engineering from Cornell. And finally, our 5th panelist is Sarah Wigginton, Deputy Director of the Wastewater Division and Program Manager at the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center, or MASS-TC, a Barnstable County initiative located at Joint Base Cape Cod. Sarah has a PhD in microbiology and is an expert in water, resource protection, and on-site wastewater treatment systems. The format for tonight's discussion will be fast-paced, so we'll have enough time to take your questions and hear your concerns. We'll begin with each of our 5 guests offering us a brief perspective on this complex topic. After the presentations, we'll have a discussion among the panelists and take your questions. So since the more I talk, the less time we have to hear from the experts. We'll get started. Well, Scott, since you're the water commissioner and chair of the committee looking at the next phase, why don't you kick off things by explaining the concept of source water protection?
All right, thanks, Dave, and thank you, all of you, for showing up tonight. It's a pretty nice night out there. Could have just hung out at home, so thanks for being here. This is a very important topic, and as Dave said, I'm wearing 2 hats here. I'm water commissioner. Mark Robinson's here. He's our 3rd water commissioner, along with Dave and I. I'm also working with Z on the ad hoc wastewater committee, as Dave said. So I'm involved in this pretty heavy, and I'm really excited to have these guys join me to talk about this really important issue. So I've got a few slides to introduce us. We can go to the next one, Dave. So first of all, groundwater, just to make, I teach, so I gotta go through this stuff. So what's groundwater? Groundwater is water in the subsurface in a saturated state. So if you dig a hole, any place on the Cape or any place on planet Earth, by that matter, you're gonna hit groundwater eventually. It's gonna fill that hole. And that's what we're seeing on the upper left. All the sand grains are saturated with water. On the upper right, we're showing groundwater flow paths. Now, probably the most important thing you need to learn about groundwater, if you don't already know, is it moves really slow. On Cape Cod, about 1 foot per day. So it'll take about a month to flow across the width of this room. That's pretty slow compared to what we see with surface water. And then the bottom right here, we've got flow towards the pumping well. We really want to talk about a couple issues, as Dave mentioned. We've got drinking water issues, we've got lakes and ponds, and we've got the bay, Katuitt Bay. They're all equally important, perhaps. This lower picture is showing groundwater flow towards a pumping well. So that's where we get all of our drinking water here in Katuitt is from groundwater. Groundwater comes from precipitation that falls on the land surface. It percolates down. That's called recharge. The amount of water we have to pump is based upon the recharge rate. We haven't had much recharge in the last 3 weeks here on Cape Cod. And my water commissioner, Chris, where are you? Great commissioner, great water superintendent. He's getting a little concerned because the water levels are dropping. But we'll get through that. Next slide. So on the source water protection, this is a picture of a well, pumping groundwater well. And the yellow area is the area that flows towards that well. EPA calls these things wellhead protection areas. Massachusetts DEP calls these Zone 2 protection areas. Town of Barnstable's map these. They're part of the zoning in the town. So we have maps, and I'm going to show them to you in a second, on the areas that flow towards those wells. So when we're interested in protecting drinking water quality, we got to be really careful about the land use, what's going on in those zones of contribution. Next slide. So here we go. We have 5 wells, 5 groundwater wells in Katuitt Water District that provide our drinking water. There they are. The darker blue shaded circles are the so-called 400-foot radius, zone 1, right around the wells. Those are essentially fenced off. We don't want anybody going in there. The first level of protection, if you will, but the groundwater comes from far beyond 400 feet. So the lighter blue shaded areas are those zone 2 areas I mentioned. That's where the water comes from. You can see this. This is a USGS base map. Those little black dots are homes. You can see the roads on there. So there's a lot going on in our areas, our zone 2 areas that flow towards our wells. That's why we have to be careful. Next slide. This is a close-up of our main well field. This is where, according to Chris, about half of our water typically comes from. That's Sampson's Mill Road running through the middle of it there. Route 28 to the north. Mariners Circle. These are lots. So, and by the way, the groundwater, I've got a pointer here, I'm going to use it. The groundwater flows from northwest to southeast. So these are all small, these are lots, and most of these have homes on them. You don't see them. And all of them, every place has a home is a septic system. We don't have sewer out here yet. Rob's going to get to that. Rob and Griffin are going to get to that later. But right now, these are all septic systems, and those are all flowing to our wells. Rough guess, 5 to 10% of the water we pump out of the ground is coming from septic systems here in Katuitt. That's not uncommon. In Yarmouth, it's about 20%. So that's something to think about. Wastewater is flowing into our drinking water supply. Treated wastewater, I should say, to some degree, some treatment. But that's really one of the subjects of tonight's meeting. I, for one, and my fellow commissioners, I think, agree, even though we're meeting water quality standards, we're staying on top of things, we're still not super comfortable with the fact that we've got maybe 100 septic systems flowing into our drinking water supply and we're shipping that to your homes for drinking water. We're meeting standards, we're treating it, but it's still wastewater sources. Next slide. I just got one more slide, I think. So we hired a consultant, Tom Cambereri, good friend, Sole Source Consulting, to do a more detailed model of where our drinking water is coming from. Because those zone 2 areas are mapped using some very conservative assumptions. No rainfall for 180 days. That's pretty conservative. Maximum pumping all the time. Chris would never do that. You can't run the pumps. So these are conservative assumptions. This model looks at what is actually happening. And you can see we've got winter pumping on the left here, and we've got summer pumping over here. So those are 3 wells. You can see, and this, again, the flow is upper left, northwest to southeast. So in the winter, it's just these lots in here. They're contributing to the well. In the summer, you can see they get a little wider because they pull the water from further away. So these are the areas we're trying to focus on. Again, our goal is to first of all continue to meet all drinking water standards we are doing. We want to do better than that because there are things called contaminants of emerging concern. When you wash your clothes, there are flame retardants that go down from your washing machine and through your septic system into the groundwater, into our wells eventually. There's also other chemicals people use at home that some of them end up at very low concentrations, for sure. And we're watching that very carefully. But nonetheless, these septic systems we view are of concern. I think that's my last slide, Dave.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn it over to Z at this point, who's going to run through some quick presentations and then open it up to discussion.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Let's go to the next slide. Everybody knows who I am, I think, by now. Z Crocker, you could read that. So, I was asked today to really talk principally about innovative alternative septic system technology. What does that mean? What it means is that, what are we using currently? I'll call everybody out. How many people have here either a Title V system or God forbid, a cesspool? Is that pretty much everybody here, I think? It should be everybody in the room, by the way. So, for those shy people, you have a system right now that, as Scott said, doesn't really do that much to treat your wastewater. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about a year ago, and it said, in the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible, they said, go make a hole away from your camp and do your business and then cover it up. Well, that's what we're still doing, right? Really, over 2,000 years later, it's not so different. It really isn't different at all, unfortunately. And so that's where source reduction comes in. Either we're going to do sewer expansion, which the town is working on, and Rob and Griffin are working on that. They're going to talk about that a lot. We're really excited about that. Or another opportunity is source reduction. So what does source reduction mean? It means we're going to try to control things from your house. So when your house, where your wastewater comes out of your house, that's where we want to clean things up. And the other alternative is innovative alternative septic system technology, which is really just a mini wastewater treatment plant. It's the wastewater that we're talking about, not the solids. So in this particular system, which can be introduced into your existing Title V system, you have a treatment tank. The lady in the picture there is showing the treatment tank. This is one particular system that we've worked a lot on. There's about 200 of them on the Cape Islands right now. That may seem like a lot, it's really not a lot because there's only 165,000 homes on Cape Cod. I think there are probably no more than 10 or 15,000 that are actually on sewer at this point. So there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to clean up our wastewater on the peninsula. And so you've got wastewater that goes into, in this case, a treatment tank. And this particular treatment tank is elegant in its simplicity. Without getting too deep into the chemistry, nitrogen is the main component we're trying to control as far as Katuitt Bay is concerned. As far as most of our water is concerned, it's a contaminant. It's also indicative of the other contaminants that Scott talked about that enter our wastewater from all of us. We, Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, have actually worked with the EPA to test the Marston's Mills River, not far from here. In that river, we found elevated antibiotics and antidepressants. So whatever we're consuming is coming out in the wastewater. Whether it's in a wash or whether it's something that we're consuming, is coming out. And so this system, elegant in its simplicity again, takes the wastewater and actually nitrifies it first. All this is happening underground with only a small air pump that's doing all the work. And that recirculating wastewater in the first section of the tank causes nitrification to happen. In the second chamber are wood chips. And in the absence of oxygen, by bacteria that would ordinarily respirate nitrogen, like all of us, in this condition, actually they respirate nitrogen. And they turn into gas. And as a gas, it's harmless. So we're breathing about 78% of the atmosphere right now is nitrogen. And so that effort actually cleans up. So these systems are getting 95 to 97% of the wastewater cleaned up. Let's look at the next slide. And so this slide shows about a dozen systems that we put in at Shubal Pond. We did an effort to do an experiment, to do work with the US EPA to look at how would these systems work in one area. Shubal Pond, you guys may know it, a Kettle Pond is not far from here. These are all small homes, quarter-acre lots, working class neighborhood, folks that might be cutting your lawn or what have you. And so what we're finding is the blue bar is how much nitrogen actually comes into a wastewater tank. And here you're looking at, it's probably around 90 or so on average, 90 milligrams coming in. And this system, as you can see in the yellow or orange, depending on what you're able to see there, is getting, probably close to 5 or 6 milligrams coming out on average. So a really good reduction, just about 95+% is what we're looking at there. And what does that mean? Let's go to the next slide. So this is how much nitrogen is being removed annually from these individual systems in kilograms. So it may not seem like a lot, and people say, my house, there's only 2 of us, we don't do much, we really don't consume a lot, etc., etc., and I get that, but the trouble is collectively, it adds up. And so when you do the math here, and you look at what's going on in individual homes, and you add that up across Katuitt, you add that up across the town of Barnstable, it adds up to a lot. And that's why, sadly, and I was out in the bay today, and it was the color of the dark part of the floor. And how disgusting is that, right? That's not what I grew up with. That's not what any of us grew up with here. And that's what we're all working to change, and that's what we have to change. So I'll leave it at that. We're going to take questions, but that's my presentation. Rob.
Thank you, Z. Wow, that is before we get going, let me correct one thing. So the town's CWD is actually managed by about 3 or 4 different people. Dan Santos, who can't be here, is the Director of Public Works. He's involved. To my left is Griffin Bowden. He's the town engineer. He's heavily involved. And on the audience today is Kelly Colopy, who's our communications director, and she's massively involved. Because what we learned pretty early on is engineers don't talk good. So we hired a communicator to try to help us with this. So I apologize that you get Griffin and I to actually be talking to you tonight. That seems kind of wrong, but that's the way this sort of worked out. Okay, let's go to my first slide, please. All right. This is supposed to be the elevator speech of a speech that normally takes an hour to an hour and a half to make, so I apologize because this will go fast. Back to first principles. So the state recognized probably about 20, 25 years ago the nitrogen issue that Z was talking about in the estuaries. And it implemented a program called Massachusetts Estuaries Program, where they looked at 89 estuaries across the southeast part of Massachusetts. They developed a land use model that would help them predict what nitrogen levels would be in the estuaries given the land use that we've currently used. And given the fact that the wastewater that we use and the fact that we use septic systems primarily to treat our wastewater. From that model came a regulation that's called the Total Maximum Daily Load, the TMDLs. That is effectively a pollution budget for any particular body of water. So that model got given to DEP. DEP came through and said, okay, for body of water X, the most nitrogen you can have in it at a certain point is, pick a number. They then went to the communities and said, okay, communities, you need to get the nitrogen below that number in those water bodies. The town of Barnstable initially did some work on this, and then in about 2014-15 timeframe, came to DPW and said, DPW, this is your problem, fix it. So we implemented a program about 6 years ago now with the Water Quality Advisory Committee, the RAC, to start looking at this and start to try to figure out how we were going to do this. And what we came up with was a comprehensive wastewater management plan. And that plan is going to address nitrogen across the community. Next slide, please. Before we get into that in detail, what you're going to see here is a slide with various sort of shade colors for these southern embayments. The way DEP thinks of the town is actually by watersheds, not by an entire geographic area. So what you're seeing with these different colors, yeah, it's the right slide. So what you're seeing with these different colors is a different watershed. So where we're sitting in right now is the darker blue one to the far left of your screen, is the Three Bays watershed, because it's serving North Katuitt and West Bay. What you'll see on that is a number towards the bottom of it, a percentage number towards the bottom of it. You'll then see in the Sonoma River watershed a percentage number towards the bottom of it. What that number is was an estimate very early on about the percent of nitrogen, existing nitrogen, that needs to be removed from that watershed to achieve the TMDLs, to achieve that water body pollution load. What that doesn't tell you, though, is, for instance, in Three Bays, is 60% of the existing nitrogen, it's 100% of all new nitrogen. So anything new going in would have to come out, because this is only anticipating what was actually at that time, which was about 20 years ago. Slide, please. Now, the way it actually got modeled, as we looked at it, is on a sub-watershed basis. And if you look behind me, what you'll see is a sub-watershed model that was done that shows the various sub-watersheds and how much nitrogen needed to be removed from each of the various sub-watersheds to actually achieve that 60%. If you look at the Three Bays area, you will notice there's a bunch of 100s there. There is only one technology that we know of, or that we knew of at the time, that would remove 100% of the nitrogen, and that's sewering, which means I remove it from the watershed. I take your wastewater, and it leaves the watershed. So the RAC at that point came up with a plan principally based on sewering that would do that. Next slide. And this is that plan. What you're looking at is a 3-phase, 10-year phase, 30-year plan. The red areas are areas that will be sewered in years 0 to 10. The green areas are areas that are going to be sewered in years 10 to 20. And the yellow areas are areas that will be sewered in years 20 to 30. Those are the places we're going to go grab sewering. You'll also notice in Katuitt that purple portion that's over there. That was the stages. So initially, when the RAC first met, what we were originally going to do was called nitrogen treating with Mashpee for the Papaneset Bay portion, because it's small. However, there's a gentleman in the audience today that came up to me very, very early in that process and said, hey, I know you can regulatorily achieve what you need to achieve by nitrogen treating with Mashpee, but Shoestring Bay is getting hammered. And it's getting hammered from stuff from our side too, and we need to relook at that. So we went back, and the committee went back and relooked at that and came up with what we call the stages. And it's called the stages because we haven't tied it in any time frame yet. And there's a reason for that we can talk about if you wish. So that's the stages over to that far left, that purple phase. Likely those are going to happen sometime in phase 2, but that's not been totally locked in at this point in time. So you have this 3-phase approach that's going on. Now, everyone says, oh my goodness, 30 years. Please understand, we're 5 years into this already. So we're already 5 years through phase 1. We're only 5 years from starting phase 2. The town has been extremely diligent moving forward. Griffin's going to take the mic up from me, and he's going to talk through sort of the implementation of how that's been going. But what I can tell you is town council to date has appropriated well over $300 million towards this problem. And is actively working on it. And I think one of the things that we're excited to talk about tonight is that we have just opened bids for the work that's going to come down 28, the backbone that's going to come down 28 and start to get down to here. So to your question earlier, Dave, about is sewer ever coming? It's coming, and it's going to be here long before, sooner rather than later. Okay.
Thanks, Rob. Next slide, please. This map shows our phase 1 implementation plan. A little better. All right, this map shows our phase 1 implementation plan. So as Rob alluded to, that red area is our phase 1, our first 10 years of implementation of sewer expansion. However, that's a big area. So we had to break it down into smaller projects in order to be able to implement the program. We are also leveraging our existing wastewater system and treatment plant in Hyannis, so the program works from east to west. So this map shows the various projects that are contemplated in phase 1, and I'll quickly walk through. Actually, is that pointer handy? Thank you. All right, perfect. So to date, we've completed 2 of our projects, and we have 2 that are actively under construction, and the remainder are all in various stages of design. So the first project that was implemented is shown here in this magenta color. That was our Strawberry Hill sewer expansion project. That project was along the Vineyard Wind cable route from Cobbles Beach up to about 132. We then, and at a parallel time, implemented what was called our Route 28 East sewer expansion project, which is shown here in green. This expanded our sewer collection system out to Finney's Lane, where we installed that new pump station at the intersection of Finney's Lane and Route 28. That's the main piece of infrastructure which will convey all the wastewater from the western part of town to the wastewater treatment plant. So everything from that point west that we're going to collect through the program will go through that piece of infrastructure. That was a large milestone for us to complete that project. We are currently actively under construction on our Centerville Village North project. That's this kind of lime green project. That will further extend sewer on Route 28 from Finney's Lane to Old Stage. It will also implement sewer along Shoepline Hill Road and in the Mother's Park area in Centerville. And as Rob alluded to, we recently, within the past month, opened bids on our Route 28 West sewer expansion project, which is this large project here in red, which will expand sewer from Old Stage Road all the way to Route 149, as well as into other areas along the way that were necessary to make that conveyance work. That's about a $50 million sewer expansion project in and of itself. That project will be completed in 2028. From there, we have another project that is actively in design, the Prince Cove sewer expansion project that will further continue the western extension of sewer to about Old Post Road. And then from there, we'll be picking up the sewer in phase 2 to continue our way to it. That's what I have, so I'll turn this over to Mark.
Thank you. I think I'm going to just stand here on the side. Maybe that's hard to turn. So I was asked to come here to talk about cluster systems, which are an option for wastewater treatment. So just to orient everybody to what this is, you heard Z talk about IA systems or septic systems. Those are underground systems on your property. Cluster systems are small wastewater treatment facilities that usually end up near, housing, closer to housing. So they're usually hidden underground. So that's what you see here. The treatment facility here is underground, and that's what it looks like. So it's kind of like having a septic system. You can't see it. So next slide. So there's advantages and challenges to these systems. It's a good option for small facilities. By small facilities, I mean you will see these around the Cape at like nursing homes and facilities like that. When larger infrastructure is not available. And it's a good option for nutrient removal, both nitrogen removal and phosphorus removal. Challenges, you have to look very closely at the cost effectiveness of this. It's not a given that it's going to work everywhere. It's just like any of the options that you hear, you need to look at the specific situation to see if it's going to work there. Okay? And this is a sophisticated treatment facility. You would need an operator to attend to a facility like this. So, next slide, please. I just have a slide here to show an example. This is in the northern part of Mashpee, and it's a unique situation. This is north of Wakeby Pond. We're looking to put a cluster system here. It's about a couple hundred properties, and it's far from any town infrastructure, and it's actually surrounded by the town of Sandwich, which has no infrastructure there. So it's sometimes unique circumstances that allow you to make something like this work. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I think I'll stand over here too. Yeah, really good at this spot. Well, yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, I'm Sarah Wigginton. I am the Deputy Director of the Wastewater Division for Barnstable County, and I'm also the Program Manager for the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. I was asked to provide our perspective on wastewater management, and I would say our overall perspective as a county entity is that we support towns and we support community members. We do not have any regulatory power. We do the supporting through funding, science, and the actual maintenance of the infrastructure. We do that through our 3 programs. The Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center was the original program established in 1999 by George Whitfelder and some other folks. The Aqua Fund, previously known as the Septic Loan Program, funds upgrades for homeowners through 0 and low interest loans for sewer connections, Title V replacements, and if you're required to have one, an IA upgrade can also be funded through that. And then our newest program is the Septic Utility Program. This is a program that was funded by the EPA to get it started up to try and make sure that we are protecting the assets that we put in the ground for on-site wastewater treatment. Next slide, please. So we are very, very supportive of all solutions at MassTC and at Barnstable County. We need sewer where sewer makes sense, where places are, highly populated. In those areas that Rob was saying need 100% removal, those are areas where sewer makes the most sense. But it's not feasible that we'll ever be able to sewer the entirety of Cape Cod. The Title V on-site systems are what's in brown there, and the sewer as of 2022 is in the black. Probably some of my fellow panelists could draw all the expansions that have happened since then, because I'm sure you're all very intimately aware. But you can see the black is a pretty small portion of the map. We're gonna make a lot of progress. There's gonna be a lot more black on this map in 5 years and 10 years, but we have to walk and chew them at the same time. There are other areas that are gonna need other solutions, like the solutions Z was talking about. Next slide. So this is just what I was saying on the last slide. It's not one or the other. Sometimes it's on-site, sometimes it's sewer, sometimes there are other mitigation tools that we need to use. We gotta use all the tools in the toolbox, and that's our overall perspective. I'm so scared.
I'd like to open the floor to questions if there are any at this time. Otherwise, we'll just start. Please, use the microphone. I think people on Zoom would appreciate it, as would the recording.
Test.
My question would be, if one is interested in an IA system at this point, and there's a plan in place for sewering, can the sewering plan end up being a disincentive to doing something earlier in the next 10 years? If we're gonna get sewered in 10 years, 20 years, or whatever, does that potentially act as a disincentive to doing something now on your own property with an IA system? And sort of based on that, has the town developed any policies on this? Because presumably sewering is going to be reflected in some sort of per property surcharge to connect and things like that. So how does one avoid the situation that somebody wants to go ahead and put in an IA system, they're going to do it? I'd be interested to know what the projected capital cost is for a 2 to 4 person household. And then you're going to get hit again because there's no policy, there's no way to exempt it from downstream connecting. So, thank you.
All right, is this going to interfere? Pretty good. Okay, so trying to unpack some of that, I'll take a start at that. So yes, it could potentially act as a disincentive in some senses. So we would not recommend, if you're like 0 to 5 years away from the sewer showing up, for you to do anything with your septic system if you don't have to. Because you will be having it. Yes, the town does have a betterment charge that goes with your property. The town council voted that that would be no more than $10,000. So that's the charge that will go to your property for the betterment. There will also be a connection charge, which is property specific in terms of how much it actually costs you to get from where your septic system is now or where your plumbing is to that sewer. And that's hard to protect because we don't know everybody's properties and what the different things there are. We have talked about policies that would, in some way, shape, or form, not disincentivize. The problem is that At the end of the day, this is where we have to comply with the TMDLs. And ultimately, the watershed permit, which is now in draft form with DEP, will come through and really formalize that. That requires that we, when we make these sewer extensions, hook people up to it. It doesn't do us good to put pipes in the road and then not have people hook up for 10, 20, 30 years. It defeats the purpose. So as a result, we've shied away from that. So what I've told people personally, and Kelly does this day in and day out, and she can tell you how she approaches it, is that, look, if you're within 5 years, don't think about it. If you're 20 years before sewer shows up, you're within basically one septic lifetime anyways, or at least as some people record it, then it's probably worth doing something. But in the middle, it gets gray, and that's going to come down to an individual decision by individual homeowners in terms of how they want to approach it and what resources they have and the value they feel that provides to the community and that kind of stuff. Kel, did you want to talk any more to that, or you good?
I can talk about costs later.
Okay. Well, Z's here, and I'll let Z talk cost.
Thanks, Rob. You know, the gentleman has asked a couple of questions that are actually very germane to everything that's going on. And the Water Resources Advisory Committee that Scott chairs and that I sit on and all of us are involved in have been talking a lot about these very issues, particularly the issue of, well, what happens if I'm within 10 years? What happens if I have a cesspool? Or what happens if my system fails? So we've been talking about these things, and there are different ideas that are being tabled. Innovative alternative septic system technology is changing as we speak. It's new technology. It is, I think it's quite proven, but it's not fully proven. And so we need to see more cases, more implementation. The county and Sarah and her team are working very hard on something called a reliable management entity. Who's going to keep track of these systems? These are not George Foreman grills. This is not a set it and forget it, okay? You can't ignore your backyard anymore and wait till something bubbles up and it's not going to be oil. So we do have to do things, and we believe collectively, I think we collectively believe, that the areas that are closest to our very important resources are those that should be targeted first. The maps that Scott showed close to our drinking water, the houses that are close to, whether it's a lake, a pond, or whether it's a Katuitt Bay, makes sense that those should be the first target to clean up. One thing that won't surprise anybody here in the room is that water usage skyrockets in summer. And so 70% of the water usage that occurs from May to September. And we all know that because we're exhausted from having so many guests in our house, right? And so that water is making its way into the bays and estuaries, and that's why I believe that it behooves anybody who can do it, who's in a position to have a system where they question or where they know it's failing, to go ahead and put in an alternative septic system in a location where, as Rob said, you're not going to see sewer soon. There are certain things that are going to incentivize that. Some are in place, some we're talking about. One of them is the state has said that if you are a resident and you want to upgrade either your Title V system because it's a cesspool or it's not a good system, it's failed, or if you want to put in an alternative septic system, you can get a tax credit of $18,000. That credit comes over 4 years. So you have to make a certain amount of money, but $18,000 is real money. What do these systems cost? Probably between $30,000 and $50,000 is a reasonable number. And why is it such a big range? It's a range because in many cases, with the system that I pictured there, this system can be put in between existing infrastructure. Your septic tank can be used as a concrete tank. It's generally not going to fail anytime soon. The leaching field is the main failure point in a Title V system, but even many of those are relatively new and they could be okay because a treatment system like the one that we're showing actually puts out almost potable water, so it's not going to compromise that leaching field. So these are things that can be done sooner rather than later with incentives, and we're talking about other incentives. One incentive that the town and the Board of Health is considering, so it's important to know that there are two regulatory bodies that are looking at this. One we've talked about, which is the Department of Environmental Protection at the state level, but the other one is our local Board of Health. The Board of Health has let us get in this game, and they're able to look at rules, change rules, adjust rules. One of the things that they're looking at is, could we allow, the state has just said anybody can have an accessory dwelling unit on their property, and could we, but it has to be treated, the wastewater has to be treated for that. So could we actually allow people to have more bedrooms if they put in one of these systems? That's a possibility. Many people would like another bedroom, would like an accessory dwelling unit, and people knock on my door all the time and say, hey, if I could do that, I'll pay for it, I'll put the whole thing in myself. So those are the kind of incentives, and I think that we know we need both a carrot to incentivize people, and then we need regulations that can get people to do things when they really need to do them. The sewer infrastructure that went into an area called Stewart Creek in Hyannis was very problematic, because even today a lot of people haven't hooked up. It wasn't mandated that you had to hook up. And this is a community thing, right? We all have to participate. Everybody participates. We all participate daily. And so we have to participate cleaning it up. That's the bottom line. I'll give it to you, Scott.
I just want to add one other quick thing back to one of my first slides, groundwater, 1 foot per day. So one of the things we're talking about in this wastewater advisory committee currently is maybe we want to target the nearshore systems, because looking at a 500-foot setback, that's about 2 years flow time. Some of us are interested in, as he was talking about, we ran into each other out in the water today, we were both out sailing, and you can't see too far through the bay anymore. So a lot of us are interested in not only meeting the regulations, but cleaning up the bay. And the best way to do that is near shore. Because some of the groundwater flow times in these, the map that Rob showed, the watersheds, 20, 30 years of flow time. So you build a sewer, you put a treatment system up there, 30 years from now, you might see a benefit. Those are the far ones. The closer to the shore, maybe a few years, but one thing we're looking at is maybe requiring upgrades to these LA systems within that 500-foot distance. And I think we see some real improvements. Let's go to another question.
Thank you all for being here. Lally Lloyd, I live on Vineyard Road. Two things. First of all, I'd love to know the gentleman who was so concerned about Shoestring Bay. I'd love to chat with you afterwards, please, because I live on Papaneset Bay. So I live in that far southwestern corner of the village, and the septic system, the sewers are never going to come there. It's just not cost efficient. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But Papaneset, because it straddles, because it's both Barnstable and Mashpee, I'd like to know what you can tell me about what the governance structure is. It's going to clean up Papaneset Bay, and what opportunities there are for citizens to get involved. I remember eelgrass in the bay, and it's dead now. And I got the complaints management, because it's an interjurisdictional something, but how is this working?
Well, I think what I was talking about, we had the Board of Health attend a couple of our recent meetings, and they're interested in thinking about a regulation to require upgrades based upon certain triggers, perhaps, like, as he mentioned, putting on a bedroom, putting in an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, that might trigger the requirement for one of these upgrades, and that would include the area you're talking about in terms of the nearshore systems.
Would that be both Mashpee and Barnstable?
That would be, well, we're just talking Barnstable right now.
Right. So
And Mashpee has, actually, this gentleman here is working in Mashpee, GHD.
Mashpee has a much bigger impact on the health of Papaneset than Barnstable does. Huge.
So, Mark Drinko with GHD, I'm working in Mashpee, so I can tell you that right now the town wastewater infrastructure is concentrated in Papaneset Bay. So they've done one phase of sewering, they've just started up a new wastewater treatment facility, and they're about to implement a second phase of sewering, and that will all take care of almost 50% of their nitrogen load, so they're progressing.
All right.
So.
Thank you.
And then from the Barnstable side, the way the bay is divided, so about 9% of the load to the bay comes from the Barnstable side, which is what we were originally going to trade away until Gary got a hold of me and said, no, you don't. So now what we're doing is we're getting down to, as we talked about earlier, we're getting down 28, so that we can then pick up those staged areas that are down below, and then sewer down on our side as well. Now, there's also a discussion, back to the committee, what Scott was talking about, there's a discussion in the interim, should there be IAs that are installed just in the immediate around, within 500 feet of the water, and that's something I know Gary is passionate about and he's talked about a number of times. So those are all being part of the conversation right now for Papaneset Bay and Shoestring Bay. That's where it stands at this point.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to add, because it's come up a couple of times, like what can we do right now? And I just wanted to touch on an innovative solution that we've been working on at MassTech. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the urine diversion project going on in Falmouth. Right now, it's not regulatory, there's no regulatory approval for urine diversion. You can get like incinerating toilets and composting toilets, but you don't get any credit for them. And there's not like an infrastructure to manage those. So we are working on urine diversion with the idea that for some people, it might be a long-term solution. And then for some folks, it might be, those areas where you're maybe never gonna be in the plan, but you wanna do something. Or you're 20 years away from sewer, and the IAs are, too expensive, they're not within your budget. This is potentially a much less expensive option. Like I said, we're working through the regulatory approvals with the plumbing board, the MDAR and Mass DEP, because there's all sorts of regulatory groups involved. But I just want to add that as a potential, it's kind of, outside the box, but that's what we do at MassTech, is think outside the box. There's a lot of these technologies that are widely used in Europe that use the toilet exactly the same. It's no user difference.
Does everybody here understand what UD is?
Urine diversion, it's simply keeping the urine out of the wastewater, out of the water, so that it never gets into the water in the first place. Because we think that about 85% of phosphorus and upwards of 70% of the nitrogen comes from our urine. So if we can take the urine out of the water stream and take it out of the watershed, either take it to a wastewater treatment plant that's outside the watershed, or ideally do nutrient recycling, we can take those nutrients out of the picture without ever having to do the wastewater, the widespread sewering, and potentially not needing as much on-site treatment. So it's not exactly an answer to your question, but it's on the edge of I think what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, just another last quick thing. Right where I live in my neighborhood, there have been lots cleared for the first time, and new houses going up where there have never been houses before. And I wonder whether there are any requirements put on the realtors to talk with the prospective owners about their burden and what's coming for them and what they can be doing right now. These people have a lot of money to be buying this land and building these houses. And does it ever face a prospective buyer?
So I'm going to step into that for a minute and say that one of the most critical things that everybody in this room can do is be active civically and talk to your town council, talk to your Mashpee representative about exactly that. I can tell you that in Osterville, not far from the office for Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, a gentleman who lives on North Bay, on the water, who said, yeah, I'm going to put one of these systems in, it's great, I love it. He paid $3.5 million for the lot that he's on. He paid an easy $3.5 million for the house. And he came to me 2 years ago and said, I can't afford that system. Well, that system was going to cost an extra $10,000 or $15,000 off of the Title V system that he put in. But he didn't put it in. He put in a Title V. He's going to pollute for the next 30 years because nobody said no, you have to do it. And that is what needs to change, okay? So exactly those lots that you're talking about, and we're seeing this all over the base, all over the place, that has to stop. To me, that's one of the most important things, that full stop. Even though I said these systems are not fully proven, they're proven enough to have action taken for people that are putting in homes right near these water conditions. So that's critically important. I want to point that out. The other thing I think this should be clear to everybody is there's a lot of different things that we need to do. So one of the things we're doing at BCWDC is we purchased a number of cranberry bogs that are right in the middle of the Marston's Mills River. We're going to try to turn those back into wetlands. The wetlands can really clean up the water very successfully. And I point that out mainly not just because we're very hopeful that it could be tremendously successful for Katuitt Bay, potentially removing up to 33% of the excess nutrient load. But it's worth pointing out that all of the most polluted estuaries are fed by rivers on Cape Cod. Pompanesett has 2 rivers, but really all the rivers are major conduits for the groundwater that's turning into surface water that gets quickly into the bays, and then it gets choked off. We know that Pompanesett is a little teeny cut, it's not as wide as this room, so it can't flush. So that's why we need to do different things. I'll leave it at that.
Hi, Jason Pence, I live in Pine Ridge Road in Katuitt. First of all, I can't tell you how comforting it is to hear science, education, and passion on this, so thank you all. We need what you're doing really, really badly. One quick extension on the last discussion on Pompanesett. I will say that I'm gratified to see on Quiniquisette, when you come up 28, if you're coming from the Mashpee Common, that whole area looks like a fight for companies to tie people into the sewer system. I'm rooting them all on and hope they all do well. But you know, that's fantastic. The question I had, and I know that this is really complicated with regards to legislature and costs and how do you encourage these things, but I noticed that on all of the slides we saw different channels by which groundwater either reaches the bay or the wells or what have you. So obviously there's riskier areas than others, all of them risky, but there are more concentrated risks. And I know that there's been an effort to focus on those first. Has there been ever any consideration by towns, the state, I don't know what the legislature would be, to say that in those areas, increased testing of existing systems should be ramped up? Because frankly, I think it's anytime you buy or sell a house, nobody's ever called me and asked me to inspect mine, and I'm not asking for that. But has there been any consideration to say, look, we've got to test those systems that are in high risk areas, and if those areas need some additional incentive to switch over systems that might be failing or close to failing for the
I'm going to walk this down to Sarah in a second, but I guess point number one, all septic systems are causing more or less the same problem. And one misconception is some people say, I have a brand new Title V system, I'm good. No, they're not. The brand new Title V system is the same, it's 20 years old in terms of nitrogen. They remove about 20% of the nitrogen, they don't remove any of the other pollutants you were talking about, the pharmaceuticals, the flame retardants, etc. So the Title V systems were not designed for water quality protection. It was designed for public health, to keep the wastewater out of the house. It works very well, but it's injecting in the groundwater. But Sarah's on top of all the testing, so literally.
So I'll say, points right there, Scott, that a conventional Title V is not doing anything for the problems that we are seeing. The nitrogen does a little bit for phosphorus, but not a whole lot. It's better than a cesspool. So that's what I would say if I was in charge of making these plans, rolling them out in phases. I think one thing I would target is cesspools near the water. I think that's probably what some towns will do, because unfortunately there are a lot of cesspools still on Cape Cod, like a lot. And so I think cesspools near the water would be, you wouldn't have to test those. You could just pull records, and it would be a concerted effort from the town to do that regulation and that outreach. As far as testing of systems, there are already over 2,000 IA systems on Cape Cod, about 2,500. We have what we call sort of old gen IA systems and what we sort of think of as new gen IA systems. And this is where people get the idea that the IA systems don't work, because the past gen, the old gen, they worked for what they were supposed to do, which was remove about 50% of the nitrogen. As you saw from these slides, we need a system that can do a lot better than that can remove 95 to 99%. So that's what he was saying, that the technology is moving fast, and that's one reason it's moving fast is because we need significantly more removal than what was allowed in these old gen systems. And so what might be helpful is if there are old gen systems that were really close to water resources, we could go test those and make sure that they're at least meeting their approval levels. So that's potential for people existing systems, but if you've got a Title V, not much you can do about that. Did you want to say that, Rob?
Just one last point on that. So when you're talking about, I just lost my train of thought. Never mind.
I can't remember what I'm talking about either.
It was gonna be brilliant too.
That's awesome.
I'll say one thing though, people say all the time, oh, Jeff just pumps my tank. Isn't it great? I'm like, no, it doesn't matter, okay? I mean, of course, you want to do the right thing. Of course, you're gonna pump your septic tank.
That protects
But
the
don't
system.
think that that is actually gonna change things dramatically.
You're pumping through protection.
Yeah, pump your septic system. It protects your system from failure, so that is
It does not
important.
protect the
But it
environment.
does not help with the nitrogen problem.
Phone doesn't like you.
No, it's not.
It's not like it at all. Hi, thanks, everybody. This is great. I also live in the western side of the village in the Papaneset Bay, and it's difficult to have no idea what's gonna happen going forward. I know you call it a stage one, but that doesn't mean much to me. Do you have a time frame or an expectation about how that's gonna get built out or developed?
Yep, so our expectation is, and what we've been talking about internally, it's not been in any way, shape, or form codified by town council yet, is that the stages are probably gonna come in the midst of phase 2. And what really drives that is we've gotta get the rest of the way down 28 to get to you. The reason why there were kind of stages initially versus tied into the phases is because really early on, and you may remember this when you were in the commission, there was a lot of conversation about, are we taking that wastewater west and going to JBCC and treating the JBCC and disposing of it there, or are we gonna go east to the plant? And it took us, Joint Base Cape Cod, and utilizing their plant and their disposal capacity there. The problem that we ran into with that whole plan was the fact that they too have limited disposal capacity, they too have limited treatment capacity, and would have equally as much challenge as we would potentially to dealing with that. So after we worked that issue about 4 or 5 years, and then eventually came back to, we're just gonna go get it. So we've got to get to you, which is why we're excited that 28 West is now open as a bid, which is why we're excited we're about to start to break ground on that. We're coming down 28 now. That will be a heavy lift. I don't mean to belate how much problem that will be for people driving on 28. But we're coming down 28, and we hope to get down here, and we hope to get down to you guys in the phase 2 timeframe.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mind if I ask a question? My name is Gary Markowitz. I'm a resident on Shoestring Bay. Shoestring Bay is the most polluted bay we face right now. If you pull up the slide, it'll tell you that. We've got some big problems. Big problems start with navigation. I had one up until a couple of days ago, but I can't get up the bay unless I'm in full high tide. So it took all the joy out of boating. I would ground, I was in the channel, I would still ground. Now with the channel markers being taken out by the Coast Guard, it's getting even worse. So my boat went up for sale. It's only a little 22-foot boat, and it was fine until it wasn't. The reason you couldn't see the bottom is because the bottom is now black, with black muck from dead and dying algae. This year, algae blooms were the size of silver dollars, linked together over probably 20, 30 yards at a time. Even the birds were coming out with black goo on their wings and their feathers. So it's pretty bad. I have a Title V system. I want to put in an IA system, and I want to hear more about the timeline on what the state is doing to fast track the approval of these things. We talk about it, we have good results, but I'm not, but we have to have that option, and the option has to be state-approved technology, so it's licensed, so we can use it, and we want to use it. The other problem is the build-out. Lots are being developed with McMansions. McMansions being 3,500, 5,500 square foot houses on half-acre lots. They say they're 3 bedrooms, but what about the loft space? What about the basement space with all the bathrooms? Whatever happened to talking about flow rates? Rob and I talked about that quite a bit. I founded Save Our Shoestring, and if anybody's interested in learning about Shoestring Bay, just shoot us an email. We've been working on it a long time. Thank you for including us in the passage of that law, the upgraded law from Title V. I want to put a system in it, but I want to know when I'm going to have state approval for that nitro system. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
There we go. Thanks, Gary. So it's a good question. Now, to get a little bit into the weeds for a minute, and part of this is really Sarah's world in Mass Tech.
Do you want me to explain how the approvals work, and I'll give you?
What's that?
Do you want me to explain the approval levels and then
I'll run through it and you can correct me if I'm wrong. There are a number of different alternative septic system technologies, probably 50 different ones at different stages of development. Massachusetts treats things differently than other states. All the states treat things differently on a state-by-state basis in terms of approval. We're probably the state that has the highest hurdles for what is called full approval. Now, Mass DEP says you can use any of the 3 stages of approval for a system. That's a pilot stage, which means there may only be up to 15 systems operating in the state that are being judged to be sufficient or not. You can still use those, the state says. Then there is a provisional approval system. Provisional means there are up to 50, perhaps even many more than 50, operating for at least 3 years while the state is looking and trying to understand the efficacy of these systems. Part of what happened was, Sarah mentioned earlier, there are probably 2,000, there are probably more than 3,000 existing systems that I said really don't work. Well, don't work is not correct, but they only reduce the nutrient load by 50%. That's not enough to clean the water, and so let's not mandate everybody to put those systems in, is what the state was thinking, and it makes sense. Let's not spend a lot of money on technology that's not going to solve the condition. After provisional approval, there's full approval. The nitro system is waiting for full approval. I think it's going to come in the not too distant future, probably within 12 months. But the developers of that system have been tweaking it to further improve the performance of the system, which has kind of put them in the, not the penalty box, but they're on hold for a little period of time. I think it will get approved. There are other technologies that are coming behind that we're optimistic about, but one of the things that I just illustrated is in this state, it takes a long time to get these through. The other thing you need to get aware of, which is also complicated and a little frustrating, is Mass DEP is one thing, the Board of Health is another. So the Board of Health says, oh, well that's great that there's a provisional system, but we're not going to mandate that. We are concerned and we want something that's fully approved. Hasn't happened yet. That's holding the Board of Health back from saying, we want to mandate. And what they want to mandate, I think, in the end is probably a level of performance and not a particular system. We don't want to say this is the only system you can use. We want to say we need a system that reduces by X amount, 90% or whatever it is, where we can all be confident that having that system in the ground is actually going to move toward solving the problem. So I hope that answers some of the questions. So I was going to add.
I just want to add, there is something that Mass DEP published this past year called the Best Available Nitrogen Reducing Systems, the BARNT list. They're approved. It doesn't matter whether they're provisional or general, they are approved to put in, and that includes 2 systems that meet this high performance. One is the Nitro, and one is the Nitrex. They both, if you want to get into the weeds, they have provisional approval, but in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. They're approved by the state. So to answer your question, you could put those in tomorrow. You don't have to wait for general approval. There are some advantages to have general approval, but I just want to be clear, they are available. There's, how many are there? Nitros in the ground?
Oh.
A couple hundred?
200, yeah.
200. So it's not an experimental system.
I know we have other questions. I should add, the biggest difference for the different approval levels for a homeowner is the O&M agreement. That's something that probably everybody kind of knows about. The operation and maintenance agreement you have to have with an IA system in perpetuity of the system's life. And that means someone is coming to the system to check and make sure that all of the elements are working and it's performing the way that it has to meet these TMDLs. And if it is a generally approved system, and there is no banner system, the best available nitrogen reducing technology, there is not one yet that is generally approved, and nitro is almost there. You have to monitor a provisionally used system 4 times a year, as opposed to a single time a year for a generally approved system. The idea being that there's a lot more data for the generally approved systems, the state has more faith that they don't need as much data. Hopefully the nitro system will soon move out of that phase, and they won't need all of the data and all of the maintenance visits, which will save a lot of funds on the O&M contracts. I also just wanted to add that the FujiClean system, FujiClean CEN, has been added to the best available nitrogen removing technology. It is also provisionally approved. And there are a couple of others, but they are not what we consider best available nitrogen reducing technology. They're on the list, but they're more of the old gen systems that remove less of the nitrogen.
Sorry, thank you. Just super quick, following up on what you said, that maybe it's a year for this system to be approved or given the appropriate approvals at the state level. I'm going to ask a tough question. Is that fair? Is that moving along at a process, a speed and a process at the state level that it should? Or can we be driving pressure on people to say, fix it? I know that's not the easiest question, but is that dragging along? Because there's a lot of people who are really motivated to do something about it. It's not having to say it.
So I just want to know for posterity, we are being recorded.
I can't weigh in on fair. Fair is really a moving target these days.
You know what I'm saying.
Right? As somebody said recently, common sense ain't so common anymore. I'll just leave it at that.
Moving on.
Hi, my name's Dave Thompson. I live on Grayland Road in Katuitt, and I'm a member of the Point Bay Yacht Club dredging committee. And if you're frustrated with trying to get sewers approved, try to get dredging approved in the state of Massachusetts.
The gentleman that doesn't.
So I bought a house a year ago that was built 2 years ago, and it has a single air D-night system, and it's an AI system, and could you tell me how effective that is?
So I can tell you that all of the data, so all of the data that is collected during those either quarterly or annual visits must be submitted to the Barnstable County IA tracking database. That is all on MassTC's website. If you go to masstc/technologies, you'll see that Norweco, because that's the company, the Singular is produced by Norweco. Yeah, so I think it might say Norweco Singular, but if you don't see that, look for Norweco. And you can click that, and you'll see summary statistics for each one of the systems that is installed. So that you can, because I don't know off the top of my head, but what the total performance of that. I think the approval is for 19 milligrams per liter for the output instead of the 10 milligrams per liter. So yes, it would be considered sort of that old gen that's targeting that 50% removal.
And this system was installed, and it needs to be tested quarterly in perpetuity, and it is definitely a maintenance problem. I mean, my recirculating pump just failed, and it's only 2 years old, and it's an air pump as well. So it is definitely a maintenance item that needs $2,000 a year to maintain that and get an inspector. So that's interesting. So
talking, he's talking about the singular. He's not talking
I know that. You bring up a really interesting point, and I don't know the answer to it, and I'm not sure if Sarah does or not, which is, if I have a system like yours, which is old gen, could I still get the state tax credit to upgrade to something that actually does work? And I don't know the answer to that question. Do
It's
you?
gonna depend, so you only can, well, I don't know the state tax credit, I know for the aqua fund, you can only get the low and no interest loans for the IA if you're being required to put it in the IA system, so I don't know about the. And I just wanted to add on the tech choice, you know, as homeowners, you do have, unless the town tells you what technology to put in, which some towns might, right? But if they don't specifically tell you, it's between you and your engineer. And you can influence what your engineer picks. And it sounds like you weren't there for the design process, but that technology page that I mentioned is really useful for seeing not only the performance, but the number of systems that are installed, because that also tells you maybe whether it's gonna be generally approved or not, and maybe what you can expect for maintenance.
So that is my next question. I'm in a 3-bedroom house. I understand that the town, I asked the town of Katuitt whether I could expand the septic, change it in order to go from a 3-bedroom house to a 4 or 5-bedroom house to add more bedrooms, and they said, no way. Because they aren't approving any new construction of anything over 3 bedrooms in Katuitt. And, you know, I definitely like to have a solution rather than, because I don't create the system, I maybe you're separating or doing whatever, because I definitely don't want to be contributing to the problem, because I live with the problem every day out in the water.
So let me touch base on the part that Sarah was just talking about, and then we'll get to that second piece. One of the things that I would encourage anybody to do that's looking at IA systems is look at them carefully in terms of how they operate. There are some of them that are very, sounds like yours, pump dependent. So it's going to be problematic if you have a power outage. It's going to be problematic if you lose a pump of that. There's others of them, more like the one that Z's talked about, which are sort of gravity flow, and then the worst thing that happens is if for some reason the box doesn't work, you still have a perfectly operating Title V system. So as you're looking at these things, just because they're on the BART list or something of that nature, I really encourage people to do what Sarah's talking about and look at those technologies and how you're going to interface with that technology and what it's going to do for you, and what it's going to require during adverse situations, and how it's going to operate for you during the situations. I'll let you talk about it.
No, I think that we thought internally and talked internally a lot about how to deal with the situation, and I don't have a great answer right now. I think that we know, you know, a comparison might be, people probably know Rise Energy, the energy consulting firm that will come to your house and say, you've got a leaky window here, you've got this problem, we'll help you put insulation in, et cetera, et cetera. And we're in the early phase of this technology where we don't have that kind of situation yet. I can tell you that even going to the websites at Mass DEP, I understand the topic pretty well. I get completely lost in the website, okay? I would look at it and say, I have no idea which one of these things works and which doesn't, I swear. And I tell DEP that all the time, it drives me crazy. But, you know, this is something that, again, I think, you know, it's a civic course that everybody in the room needs to get on the horn and say, this needs to be simple for me. You need to explain it, you need to simplify it. Give me some things that I can actually understand and read, okay? Don't make it like, you know, the back of what we used to get for a credit card, and it would be like great small print, 50 pages long, we can't figure it out. We're still there, sadly, so I wish I had a better answer. I think the good news is the technology is improving dramatically. We're gonna have easier answers, but we don't have them yet.
Yeah. Well, providing incentives in return for homeowners expanding their bedrooms or putting in an accessory dwelling unit, it'd be great to require that we would upgrade our system.
100%, couldn't agree with you more.
And again, that's one of the health regulations we're looking at and working with the Board of Health right now. So hopefully we'll see some movement on that short term.
We're at 8:30. Last question, and then we'll wrap her up.
It's such a good question the first time.
As a business guy, let me just ask a couple of business driven questions. So if I want to go out and buy a new IA system, the budgetary numbers are 30 to 50, it doesn't really matter what it is. If I want to go out and buy a single Katuitt skiff, it's going to be a very large number.
Brand new one.
If I go out and want to place an order for 25 or 50 brand new Katuitt skiffs, it's going to cost half that much. With IA systems, everybody's on their own to go out and buy one-of-a-kind systems. Is there any effort to group buys and get some purchasing economy into this, which would have a very substantial impact? So that's question number one, and related to the cost of these systems. With these new IA systems, this is a little bit, is there intellectual property associated with these? Are these, when the design gets approved, is it going to be the design that is owned by X corporation, which is of course going to very much limit that downward economies as the volume goes up, because of course that's that business's dream, is to sell 1 million of the things that you can only buy from my company? Or is this public domain technology?
So the second part, these are, most of the systems, virtually all the systems being considered now are private, and so you need to deal with the companies. What we are seeing is more companies coming in. Somebody mentioned Fuji Claim. They haven't really been in Massachusetts, but they're selling like hotcakes in New York. Long Island, there are thousands of them in Long Island. There's like 2 in Massachusetts. They're here now because there's a market. So I think that's what we're going to see is more competitors coming in, which is going to drive the price down, at least theoretically. On the first question, somebody, I forget who mentioned it, but there is a project underway by MassTech to develop a responsible management entity. In fact, the slide said septic utility, SUP. And one of the ideas of that is, as you're suggesting, instead of each homeowner dealing with purchasing, maintaining, having a contract, the idea would be the town or the county would provide that service, and they'd be grouped. In fact, 2 towns have been asking, I work for the town of Wellfleet, and they actually looked at bulk purchasing, as you suggested, these systems to drive the price down, and there were negotiations underway to do that. So that is certainly, and that came up in our discussion in Barnstable as well. So yes, that certainly can happen, but I also think the competition is going to drive the price down. And MassTech is also doing some really good work on Martha's Vineyard right now, where they're doing, we've been hearing about the maintenance. You have to have somebody come 4 times a year. Well, that can get expensive if the homeowner contracts with a contractor. What they're doing in the vineyard is they're going out and doing all these systems instead of each contractor. MassTech is doing it, and they're doing it much more cost effectively. So that's one of the things we're looking at, is developing this septic utility program to provide these services at a much lower rate. Now, you want to say more about this, Sarah?
I just wanted to add that the scheme that Scott described, where we go and do a bunch of systems all at once, was really allowable because of the Schuylkill Pond project, where we got to sort of try that out. I'm having a moment like we're dead. I was going to say something else now.
See, it's catchy.
It must be getting late. It could have been that good.
What you guys have done to your panel, like sucked our brains dry. But as you said, the other question that the gentleman brought up was, I was smiling because in our committee meeting that we talked about, Rob was actually saying, the town could buy these in bulk. We could do this all at once. We could help. So, whether it's the county or whether it's the town, I think that buying in bulk is going to be the answer. We need lots of these things. It's going to drive price down. Yes, the one I referred to has IP associated with it. It also, the parts are actually quite simple and straightforward. It's a concrete tank. It's plastic lumber. It's a certain amount of plastic piping. It's some very fundamental things. Wood chips. Wood chips are not expensive, okay? We can create them all, most of us in our backyard. So I think that we're going to see the price come down over time, but we don't have that kind of volume yet. Somebody at EPA said to me, it's still an artisanal business. It's like buying sourdough bread. We're not yet building Wonder Bread capacity, we need to. Anyway, anything else?
I'd like to really thank the panel. This has gone far beyond. And for more information, feel free to contact the Water Department, Department of Public Works, has a huge number of resources. Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, I strongly recommend, they did an economic analysis of the different solutions, which I thought was brilliant last spring. And to all of you, thank you.